If you're on a BlackBerry, then sorry about it. By the way, watch that BlackBerry movie on the flight over.
I did see it.
To South Korea.
I didn't see the movie, but I noticed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it good?
It's all right. It was interesting, you know, because I loved my BlackBerry back in the day.
Yeah. I never used one, so. But I remember them.
Ivey, King Jack suited, cutoff, open. Hajiyev on the button, and a big stack could look like he's looking to bully here, as we know the 3-bet is inbound.
Yeah, let's see what sizing he comes with.
Sure.
450, so it's a little bigger. It's a little bigger. He's going almost 3x in position. And once you get down to these shallow depths, that's, even though that's quite standard for deep stacks, it's a large in position 3-bet sizing here. Sometimes with ICM, you kind of prefer that as you have a polar range. Now, let's see what Ivey decides to do. I mean, okay, Ivey's going to call.
So 450 deemed the right price to continue.
Today we have a hand featuring the legend of poker, Phil Ivey. He opens up playing about 25 big blinds deep to 160,000 at 40,000, 80,000 in this $30,000 buy-in Triton Poker tournament in the cutoff with King Jack of clubs. Ramin, the chip leader, on the button with Ace King opposite 3-bet. Back around to Ivey. He could rip it all in. This is a spot where if you're playing perfect GTO, calling is the solution. But if you think the chip leader is getting overly out of line, going all in a little bit wider, especially with good, strong, suited high cards, is a pretty reasonable option. Ivey has good reads, though. He calls. I guess if he had the perfect reads, he would fold. But Ivey has good reads. He does not rip it in. Let's head to the flop.
With a dominated suited king for Phil Ivey, out of position and covered, 1.1 in the middle, but not really anything of interest on the 6-high rainbow texture. Does check over.
This is a flop that's not very likely to interact with either player much. I would say that maybe, I mean, better for Hajiyev in the sense that it might interact with some of his bluffs, like the ace-x suited stuff. And then he'll tend to have some of the better pairs. Like Ivey can definitely have some pairs here, but Hajiyev, the one who can really have like jacks, queens, kings, because Ivey would shove those. I mean, Ivey might still play aces, but so it makes sense for Hajiyev to bet quite a bit here, and pretty dicey spot for Phil. I mean, he's not doing very well, but
nevertheless, he is going to tear one off for 275.
The flop comes 6 of spades, 4 of hearts, 3 of clubs. Ivey has 2 overcards and a backdoor flush draw. Ramin has ace-high. Phil Ivey checks. This is a spot where Ramin should continuation bet very, very frequently because he's going to have all sorts of overpairs in his range, as well as just hands that have pretty good equity. So he does go for the tiny 25-ish% pot bet. Back around to Ivey. This may look like a trivially easy fold. And again, in GTO world, folding is used a large chunk of the time with hands like just 2 overcards with a backdoor flush draw. But King Jack of clubs actually should call some small portion of the time, which is exactly what Ivey does. Let's head to the turn.
So I wonder if he has plans to maybe bluff this later on some runouts as well. We can.
Interesting 4-liner and backdoor hearts here. Not to cut you off, Rasty, but the price was right for Phil to continue. Now, not sure whether or not either camp can rep deuce X, 7X.
I mean, in some ways, I think this is kind of a good card for Phil because it starts to become more likely that maybe this goes check-check. And Phil's probably going to bluff the river here with king high, and not even the best king high. I wonder, looks like he's thinking about doing it immediately on the turn.
Pocket sevens comes to mind as maybe the kind of kit that could be credibly represented as something that is meaningfully interacting with this board, Rast.
Sure. But
Sets
also, I think
as well?
Set, yeah. I'm not sure if Ivey peels very much with hands like 3s, 4s, 5s, I mean pre-flop to the 3-bet?
The turn is the 5 of hearts, and Ivey takes forever before checking, and then Ramin checks it back. Now you may say, should Ivey ever lead on this turn? Well, again, in GTO world, this is a spot where you want to lead all in, primarily with pocket aces, which Ivey should have in his pre-flop slow playing range, and he will check call the flop. And then you should also be leading with a smattering of draws, mainly hands containing an 8, and with weaker flush draws, like King, Jack of hearts. King, Jack of clubs, though, has very little equity in this scenario if you bet and get called, so you're better off just checking it. Ivey does it, Ramin checks it back. Let's head to the turn. Not the turn, let's head to the river.
Yeah, so check, check, and I think, oh, well.
Straight on board.
The card's a little bit less interesting. I mean, Ivey probably has, neither one has an 8 very often here, so, I mean, Ivey's going to bet, and Ramin's probably going to call, and we'll chop it up. Would have liked to see a different river card. It would have been a lot more interesting from a poker perspective.
I'm all in.
Yeah.
Ivey jamming.
The river is the 7 of spades, putting us straight on the board. Ivey is not afraid. He puts all of his money in. Again, a very good, strong GTO approved play. This is a spot where a lot of people think, oh man, well, he could have an 8, so I better check. And while it is true, Ramin could have an 8, he actually should not have all that many 8s in GTO world at all. So if Ramin has basically no 8s, and you have a few, you get to be hyper aggressive in this scenario, which is exactly what Ivey does. Let's see if Ramin tries to get half the pot.
The jam isn't not even the size of the pot, though. So it's like the way to break this down is Ivey's moving in for like 1.3. There's like 1.6 in the middle. So he's got to call 1.3 to win 800. And how often do you think Ivey basically has an 8? And he can have some 8s, specifically maybe pocket 8s. But, you know, maybe 7-8 suited. 8-9 suited, starting to get like, does he really play it this way? I just don't think he has an 8 enough that you can really fold here. And he's going to be able to pretty liberally jam everything else because Hajiyev has almost no 8s. Oh, wow, he lets it go.
Nice.
Value proposition deemed no good.
After a bit of thought, Ramin lets it go, and Phil Ivey scoops a gigantic pot late in this $30,000 buy-in tournament. Interestingly enough, every single hand in Ramin's range should probably find a call on the river, because even though Ivey does have a few 8s in his range, he actually doesn't have all that many either. So even though Ramin has essentially no 8s in his range, Ivey only has a few, and for that reason, this is going to be a chop pot the vast majority of the time. Phil Ivey, though, steals this pot and adds a healthy amount to his stack. Look, Phil Ivey has definitely stood the test of time, perhaps the greatest poker player of all time. It's debatable. There can only be one number one, but it just might be Phil Ivey. What I want to know, before we wrap it up today, is which young poker player today do you think will end up standing the test of time and will have an Ivey-like legacy 10 or 15 years from now? Take a second, think about it, and let me know in the comment section down below. While you're down there, click the like and subscribe button. Thank you for being here, and I'll talk to you next time.